ordered President Cyril Ramaphosa basically found that his decision to recognize Misuzulu kaZwelithini as leader of the AmaZulu nation was unlawful and invalid. The president basically now directed to go back to the drawing board, if you will, to restart that process of recognition of a monarch. Let's bring in legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala for more on this. Mpumelelo, a very good evening to you. Good to have your time. So, a lot of people are confused tonight as to what this means, especially for the standing of the king of AmaZulu. Does it have any bearing?
On a technical basis, I would say no. Remember that there are two ways in which this whole process of recognizing the Zulu has to go by. The first one is the customs or the rituals which are done by the Zulu nation, of which on that particular one, you may come back and say, yes, you still have the seal. On the recognition, it's only on that one in which doubt can then be cast. However, there's still a window or an opportunity for an appeal that can be filed by King Misuzulu, in which up until that particular period has ended, then you can say he is still sitting in the seat up until that particular period expires and is not able anymore to take this matter any further if needs be. And that also applies to the office of the president, by the way, if they feel that they need the SCA to further deal with this particular matter. So on a technical basis, we may come back and say you still have the King Misuzulu sitting on the throne, and he is the one that must be recognized as King up until further notice or up until the appeal period is expired.
Legally, though, does it expose Misuzulu, the king, to further challenges, if you will, because there are some of his siblings who've already said they don't believe he's the rightful heir to the throne?
Yes, it does on two bases. The first one is to say, well, there's going to be a point of contention now as to what exactly happens up until this matter has been finally decided. You may find individuals going to court and saying to the court, can you please make sure that they not receive any benefits that you ought to receive? Because the situation would be, how do you restore the position that it was supposed to be in if it is found at a later stage that is not individual, that is not to be named as a seal? You know that position comes with a lot of perks, if you may put it in that particular manner. There's the salary, there's the cars, there's the security, and any other influence that may be there in performing of the offices or what your sealers ought to perform. So they may go to court and say, up until that is done and dusted in terms of this main dispute in which they've been able to lay a valid claim as it stands today, as to that there might have been a problem in the recognition process or the second part of the recognition process, then you may see them going to court and saying, please protect our rights in this particular case. Or you may see the court taking the stance of saying that once a seal has been appointed as per the Zulu customs, that's how things are supposed to be. The recognition by the president is merely the certification of what the ground rules or what the decision that has been taken by the Zulu nation has been taken, and no one can be able to remove that particular process. So whether the president recognizes him or not, at the end of the day, the status of being named the seal will not change, because the rituals and the recognition and the understanding and the acceptance by the Zulu nation has already been there and is certified and given to King Misuzulu.
Let's speak then to the legal significance of the directive from the High Court that the president basically set up a committee to investigate whether or not the recognition of Misuzulu as king of AmaZulu, as leader of the nation, was done in line with the appropriate customs. What would that entail legally, and what happens in the interim for the relationship between the government and the king?
Basically, the court was telling the president to say, Mr. President, you must do what you ought to have done in the first place after this particular dispute has been tabled on your table. So the mere submission of the letter, you ought to have understood that there's maybe a dispute as to who his seal ought to be. And as per the Traditional Leadership and Causan Act, you are mandated. In fact, it's not even a discretion. You are supposed to then set up a committee made up of experts, which are cultural experts and individuals that know how to deal with this particular matter and can be able to do these type of investigations. Those particular individuals will then act as people who are going to sit in, deal with the disputes that are there, deal with the evidence that is there, deal with the credibility of whatever submissions which are going to come in, and at the end of the day, make a submission to you, Mr. President, recommending an individual that ought to be recognized as a seal, similar to what the JSA would do pertaining to judges and pertaining or after that particular process has been done and dusted. Only then, Mr. President, you can issue out this recognition certificate. Part and parcel of what the investigation committee is going to do is to look at whether cultural customs and matters that ought to have been done culturally have been complied with. Now, it comes back to this thing of saying that you have to make sure that the individuals who are going to make up that committee are people that are well vested in cultural law, well vested in cultural matters when it comes to the appointment of kings, which again is going to be a point of contention, because that person who's going to be part and parcel of that committee must be seen to be independent, not to be biased in any manner. So any utterances that have been made by those cultural experts in the previous occasions, you may see one of the parties going to court and say, of course they're going to rule in this particular manner because they didn't like us from the first place. So it was wrong for them to be part and parcel of that investigative committee. Once that committee has done and dusted, or it has made its recommendation, it then sends over its recommendation to the president, and the president simply appoints the person recommended by that particular committee. What happens from then up until now is going to depend on how the litigants want to deal with this particular process. The first option is to say, we do not want to be prejudiced if ever we are then recognized as ISIL at a later stage. So stop ISIL Misuzulu from occupying or being recognized as ISIL, even the plaques that are there. Remove those particular plaques up until this matter has been done and dusted. Or the second option would be to say, well, continue utilizing them. There's no prejudice which is going to be suffered, which is again, if they go to court, that's the one thing in which the court is going to look at. What prejudice is being suffered by him occupying that position? Are there any certain decisions that ought to be taken? If there's no one occupying that position as it stands now, can you be able to have a Zulu nation which is going to be able to function? If the answer is no, then he will still have to remain there, or even be changed to be called Ibamba rather than ISIL, so that he will just legal compliance with whatever legislative requirements they need to comply with.
And just at the beginning of the summary, which I'm looking at in front of me at the moment, it says, the judgment is not about who should be king of AmaZulu. The applicants did not ask the court to determine that issue. And I wonder how much of this legal bungle, if you will, by government, was the result of a rushed process, perhaps to be seen to be doing what was right at the time.
I think on that basis, we must separate it into two. Separate the cultural customs that are recognizing or are recognizing ISIL. If that has been complied with, the submission of the name to the president was simply a sort of a compliance basis. So the president would have no discretion in choosing who should become ISIL or not. It is simply a process of saying that we have sat as a family and we've considered this particular name, and this is the name that you should be able to deal with. Hence why the court was sort of at pains to explain that we have not been asked to determine who the next ISIL is going to be. We have simply been asked to assess on a compliance basis on what the Act says and the procedures and steps that ought to have been taken, where those steps followed. If the answer is no, as the court has come to determine that, only then we can come back and say the recognition of this particular individual has not gone according to custom. Not to say that they are not the ones or they are the ones, but on the compliance basis, in complying with the legislative processes that are there, then it does not pass that particular test.
Mpumelelo Zikalala, always good to speak to you. Thank you so much for getting on the line with us, especially at such short notice on this breaking news tonight. The High Court saying that the recognition of kaZwelithini as king or leader, if you will, of AmaZulu as a nation